What happens when a prince walks into a morning show expecting royal treatment but gets real questions instead? It only took one comment about privacy for everything to completely fall apart. Michael Strahan sat across from Prince Harry in the Good Morning America studio, and you could feel the tension before they even started talking. The cameras were rolling, the lights were bright, and millions of people were watching from home. Harry looked uncomfortable from the very first second, shifting in his seat like he already wanted to leave. Strahan started with what seemed like a simple question. "Thanks for being here today. I want to talk about your new projects and what you've been up to. But first, a lot of people are curious. You've spoken a lot about wanting privacy for your family, but you've also done interviews, documentaries, and written a book. How do you balance those two things?" Harry's face changed immediately. His jaw got tight and his eyes went cold. "That's a bit of vibe. A loaded question, isn't it?" he said, his voice sharp. "I think you're misunderstanding what privacy means." Strahan kept his cool, smiling politely. "I'm just asking what a lot of viewers are thinking. Help me understand." Harry leaned forward, his tone getting more aggressive. "Privacy doesn't mean silence, Michael. It means controlling our own narrative instead of having the tabloids lie about us every single day. But I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand the difference." "Someone like you?" Those words hung in the air like a bomb that just went off. The studio went quiet. You could see the producers off camera looking at each other, not sure what to do. Strahan's smile faded, but he stayed professional. "Someone like me?" Strahan asked calmly. "What does that mean exactly?" Harry waved his hand dismissively. "Someone who's never had to deal with the kind of persecution my family has faced. You read off a teleprompter every morning. You don't know what it's like to have your entire life dissected." Strahan took a breath. You could tell he was choosing his words carefully. "I've actually faced quite a bit in my own life and career, but we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about you. And I think that question was fair." "Fair?" Harry's voice got louder. "Nothing about this is fair. I came here thinking we'd have an actual conversation, not some tabloid interrogation." "I asked you one question," Strahan said, his voice still calm but firmer now. "One question that your own actions have made people curious about. That's not an interrogation. That's journalism." Harry laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was bitter and mocking. "Journalism? Is that what you call this? Sitting here in your comfortable studio, making millions of dollars, pretending to care about real issues?" The crew members were frozen. Nobody knew where this was going. Strahan sat up straighter in his chair. "I'm going to stop you right there," he said. "You can disagree with my questions. That's fine. But you're not going to sit here and disrespect me or this show. We invited you here as a guest." "A guest?" Harry shot back. "You invited me here to embarrass me, to get your ratings, to make yourself look good by tearing me down." "That's not true and you know it," Strahan said. His voice was steady, but you could hear the frustration building. "We sent you the topics in advance, you agreed to everything, and now you're upset because I asked you to explain yourself?" Harry stood up halfway, pointing his finger at Strahan. "I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else. Do you know who I am? Do you know what my family has been through?" "Sit down," Strahan said firmly, not yelling, but commanding. "You're on national television. Act like it." Harry didn't sit down. Instead, he ripped off his microphone, the wire snapping as he yanked it from his shirt. "I don't need this. I don't need you. And I certainly don't need to sit here and be disrespected by someone who doesn't understand anything about my life." "Then leave," Strahan said simply. "If you can't handle one straightforward question, then leave. But don't blame me for your reaction." That seemed to make Harry even angrier. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Sitting there with your smug face, acting like you're some kind of hero. You're nothing but a puppet." The producers were rushing onto the set now. You could see them in the background, trying to figure out how to handle this disaster. Strahan stood up too, facing Harry directly. "I've been respectful to you from the moment you walked in here," he said. "I've given you a platform. I've asked you fair questions. And this is how you respond? By insulting me and my team? Your platform?" Harry's face was red now. "I don't need your platform. People want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from some former athlete playing journalist." That was the line. That was the moment where everyone knew this was over. Strahan's expression went completely cold. "Get him out of here," he said to the producers. "We're done. You can't kick me out," Harry said, his voice getting higher. "You can't do that." "I absolutely can," Strahan replied. "This is my show, and you've crossed every line there is. You came here as a guest and you've acted like we're beneath you. So yes, you need to leave. Right now." Two producers stepped forward, not touching Harry but making it clear he needed to go. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one of them said quietly. Harry looked around like he couldn't believe what was happening. "This is unbelievable. Wait until people hear about this. Wait until the world hears how I was treated here." "They're watching right now," Strahan said, gesturing to the cameras that were still rolling. "They saw everything. They saw me ask you a reasonable question. They saw you lose control. They saw you insult me and my crew. So please, tell the world, tell them, exactly what happened here." Harry's mouth opened and closed like he wanted to say something else, but no words came out. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair and started walking toward the exit, the producers following behind him. But he wasn't done yet. He turned back one more time, pointing at Strahan. "You're going to regret this," he said. "You have no idea what you've just done." Strahan didn't flinch. "The only person who should have regrets right now is you. You had a chance to have a real conversation. You chose to make it personal. That's on you, not me." Harry shook his head and walked off the set. You could hear his footsteps echoing as he left the studio. The doors slammed behind him, and just like that, he was gone. Strahan stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. The studio was completely silent, except for the sound of the cameras still running. He looked directly into the camera and spoke to the audience at home. "Well," he said, his voice measured and professional. "That was unexpected. We brought Prince Harry here today to have a conversation. We prepared questions. We treated him with respect. And you all saw what happened. I don't think I need to add anything else to that." He sat back down in his chair, straightening his papers on the desk. His co-hosts, who had been watching from the side, didn't know what to say. One of them finally spoke up. "Michael, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Strahan said, nodding. "I'm disappointed. I think we all are. But I'm fine. You can't let someone else's behavior change who you are. I asked a fair question. I did my job. And if that made him uncomfortable, that's something he needs to work through, not me." The camera cut to a wide shot of the studio. You could see the empty chair where Harry had been sitting just moments before, his microphone lying on the floor where he'd thrown it. The image said everything that needed to be said. Back to Strahan. He looked tired but resolute. "We have a great show planned for the rest of the hour," he continued. "We have incredible guests coming up. We have important stories to share. So we're going to move forward. Because that's what professionals do. We keep going." But before they could transition to the next segment, Strahan added one more thing. "I want to say this clearly. I have nothing personal against Prince Harry. I don't know what he's going through privately. I don't know what pressures he's facing. But what I do know is that when you agree to come on a show, when you agree to answer questions, you don't get to attack people just because you don't like the questions. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works." He paused, making sure every word landed. "I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, athletes, and activists. I've asked tough questions to all of them. Some of them didn't like it, but they answered. They engaged. They showed respect even when they disagreed. That's what adults do. That's what mature people do. And unfortunately, that's not what we saw today." The control room was scrambling. This was live television, and nobody had a script for what was happening. But Strahan was handling it perfectly. He wasn't being mean. He wasn't gloating. He was just being honest. "I think what bothers me most," Strahan continued, "is the entitlement. The idea that someone can come onto a show, agree to an interview, and then get angry when they're actually interviewed. That's not how journalism works. That's not how conversations work. And if you can't handle people asking about the contradictions in your own public statements, maybe you shouldn't be making public statements." One of his co-hosts tried to move things along. "Michael, we should probably go to commercial." "You're right," Strahan agreed. "We should, but I needed to say that first. I needed to make it clear that what you just witnessed wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't taken out of context. It was exactly what it looked like. A guest who couldn't handle basic scrutiny and lashed out instead of engaging." The commercial break finally came. Behind the scenes, the entire studio was in chaos. Producers were on phones. Network executives were getting called. Legal teams were being consulted. Social media was exploding. This was going to be everywhere within minutes. When they came back from commercial, Strahan had composed himself completely. He smiled at the camera like nothing had happened. "Welcome back to Good Morning America," he said warmly. Up next, we have an amazing chef who's going to show us how to make the perfect holiday meal on a budget. Stay with us. And that was it. He moved on. Professional, classy, unbothered. But in that studio, everyone knew they had just witnessed something huge. They knew that moment was going to be replayed over and over again. They knew people were going to be talking about it for days, maybe weeks. The thing about live television is that you can't take anything back. You can't edit it. You can't pretend it didn't happen. What you see is what you get. And what millions of people saw that morning was a prince who came in expecting to be treated with kid gloves and a host who treated him like any other guest. Strahan had asked a simple question, a question about privacy and public life, a question that wasn't mean or unfair or designed to trap anyone. It was the kind of question any journalist would ask, the kind of question Harry should have been prepared for. But instead of answering it, instead of explaining his perspective or even politely disagreeing, Harry had attacked. He'd made it personal. He'd insulted Strahan's career, his intelligence, and his worth. And he'd done it all on live television in front of millions of witnesses. The empty chair sat there for the rest of the show, a silent reminder of what had happened. Nobody moved it. Nobody sat in it. It was like a monument to the disaster that had just unfolded. During the next commercial break, Strahan's co-hosts gathered around him. "Are you sure you're okay?" One of them asked again. That was intense. "I'm good," Strahan said, and he meant it. "I've dealt with worse. And honestly, I feel bad for him. I really do. Because he just showed the world exactly who he is, and that's not something you can take back." "Do you think he'll apologize?" another co-host asked. Strahan shrugged. "I don't know. I don't really care. An apology doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change how he acted. And it doesn't change the fact that he couldn't handle one question without falling apart." The show continued. They interviewed the chef. They talked about holiday shopping tips. They shared heartwarming stories about community heroes. It was a normal show, except for the giant elephant in the room that nobody could stop thinking about. Social media was on fire. Everyone had an opinion. Some people defended Harry, saying Strahan had been too aggressive. But most people saw it for what it was, a host doing his job and a guest who couldn't handle it. The clip was already being shared everywhere. People were analyzing every word, every expression, every moment. It was becoming one of those cultural moments that defines how we see someone. And through it all, Strahan remained calm. He didn't go on social media to defend himself. He didn't give more interviews about it. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. As the show wrapped up, Strahan gave his closing remarks. "Thank you all for watching today," he said to the camera. "It's been quite a morning, but that's live television for you. You never know what's going to happen. We'll see you tomorrow." Off camera, after the show ended, Strahan sat in his dressing room for a minute, processing everything. His phone was blowing up with messages from friends, family, and colleagues. Everyone wanted to know if he was okay. Everyone wanted to talk about what happened. But Strahan just smiled to himself. He knew he'd handled it right. He knew he'd stayed professional. He knew he'd been respectful, even when Harry wasn't. And that was all that mattered. A producer knocked on his door. "The network wants to talk to you." "Of course they do," Strahan said, standing up. "Let's go." As he walked down the hallway toward the executive offices, crew members stopped him to offer support. "You did great out there," one camera operator said. "You kept your cool. Thanks," Strahan replied. "That's all you can do, right? Stay true to yourself." The question that started everything was so simple, so straightforward. It wasn't a gotcha question. It wasn't mean-spirited. It was just asking Harry to explain something that a lot of people were wondering about. But Harry had taken it as an attack. He'd seen it as disrespect. He'd interpreted a normal journalistic question as some kind of persecution. And that said everything about where his mind was. In the executive meeting, the network bosses wanted to know every detail. They wanted to make sure Strahan was okay. They wanted to discuss how to handle the fallout. But mostly, they wanted to tell him he'd done the right thing. "You handled that perfectly," one executive said. "You didn't escalate. You didn't get defensive. You just stood your ground." "I just did my job," Strahan said simply. "That's what I'm here to do." "Well, your job just got a lot more complicated," another executive joked. "This is going to be everywhere." Strahan nodded. He knew. But he wasn't worried. He'd been honest. He'd been fair. And he'd been professional. Those three things would carry him through whatever came next. The truth was clear to anyone who watched the interview. Strahan had been the adult in the room. He'd tried to have a real conversation. He'd given Harry every opportunity to explain himself, to share his perspective, to engage like a reasonable person. But Harry had chosen confrontation over conversation. He'd chosen insults over insights. He'd chosen to storm off rather than sit and talk. And in doing so, he'd revealed something fundamental about himself. He talked about wanting to control his own narrative, but the moment someone asked him to explain that narrative, he fell apart. He talked about wanting privacy, but he couldn't articulate why privacy meant doing constant public interviews. The contradiction was obvious to everyone watching, and instead of addressing it, instead of explaining it, Harry had attacked the person asking about it. That's what made the whole thing so stunning. It wasn't just that Harry had gotten upset. It was that he'd gotten so upset over such a basic question. A question he should have been prepared for. A question he should have had a thoughtful answer to. But he didn't have an answer. He just had anger. And that anger had destroyed any goodwill he might have built during the interview. Strahan's phone kept buzzing with messages. Other journalists, other hosts, other celebrities. Everyone wanted to know what had really happened behind the scenes. Was Harry always like that? Had there been warning signs? What was he like before the cameras started rolling? But Strahan didn't share those details. He didn't gossip. He didn't try to make Harry look worse than he already did. He just let the footage speak for itself, because that's the thing about integrity. You don't need to tear other people down to make yourself look good. You just need to be consistent, be honest, be fair, and let the chips fall where they fall. The interview had started like any other. Friendly greetings, small talk, a guest who seemed ready to promote whatever project they were working on. Nothing unusual, nothing concerning. But the moment that first question came out, everything changed. Harry's entire demeanor shifted. The friendly mask dropped and something else appeared. Something defensive, something hostile. Looking back at the footage, you could see it in his eyes. The second Strahan mentioned privacy, Harry decided this was going to be a fight. He'd already made up his mind that he was being attacked, even though he wasn't. And that's what made the whole situation so sad, in a way. If Harry had just taken a breath, if he'd just listened to the question and given a thoughtful answer, it could have been a great interview. He could have explained his position. He could have won people over. Instead, he'd proven every critic right. He'd shown that he couldn't handle tough questions. He'd demonstrated that he expected special treatment. He'd revealed that his thin skin was even thinner than anyone thought. Strahan, meanwhile, had shown exactly why he was one of the best in the business. Under pressure, he'd stayed calm. Under attack, he'd stayed professional. When insulted, he'd stayed dignified. That's the difference between someone who's earned their position and someone who was born into theirs. Strahan had worked for everything he had. He'd proven himself over and over again. He knew how to handle adversity because he'd faced it his entire life. Harry, on the other hand, had always had people protecting him, always had people making excuses for him, always had people telling him he was special and important and above the normal rules. So when he encountered someone who wasn't going to do that, someone who was going to treat him like any other guest, he didn't know how to handle it. He short-circuited, he lashed out, he ran away. The interview that was supposed to rehabilitate his image had done the exact opposite. It had confirmed every negative thing people said about him. It had shown that the critics were right and the defenders were wrong. And the worst part was that it was all his own doing. Strahan hadn't set a trap, the network hadn't ambushed him. He'd done it to himself, simply by being unable to control his own emotions for 30 minutes. As the day went on, and the clip spread further, the reaction became more and more one-sided. Even people who usually supported Harry were struggling to defend what they'd seen, because there was no defense. It was all right there on camera. Strahan's question, Harry's overreaction, Strahan's calm response, Harry's escalation, Strahan's professionalism, Harry's meltdown. Frame by frame, moment by moment, it was clear who had been in the right and who had been in the wrong. And that clarity was devastating for Harry, because in the age of video, you can't rewrite history. You can't claim something didn't happen or happened differently. Millions of people saw it with their own eyes. They saw a host trying to do his job. They saw a guest who couldn't handle it. They saw respect met with disrespect. They saw patience met with hostility. It was a masterclass in how not to handle an interview. And, unfortunately for Harry, it was a lesson he'd learned in front of the entire world.